So in section 4.5, we're almost done with this chapter. In section 4.5, they say take a look at some things that happen all the time, and if you recognize that pattern, they become really, really easy to factor. The easiest of all is when I have something that looks like x squared minus 25. What's missing in this? I want to factor it. It's missing the x, right? There's no middle term. Maybe it would help you to think about it like this. X squared plus 0x minus 25. I don't necessarily recommend you write it out like that every time, but maybe it helps you to think about it that way. Because now I can apply the same thought process. What multiplies to be a negative 25, but adds to be 0? Well, to get a negative number, I have to have one positive and one negative, right? And to get them to add together to be 0, they have to be opposites, like plus 5 and minus 5, right? 25 only has that one option of 5 and 5. So this is going to factor to x plus 5, x minus 5. Look at this one. X squared minus 36. Again, that middle term is missing. You don't have to think of it this way, because pretty soon you'll start to recognize how this always happens, and you don't even have to really think about it. It's just an automatic thing. What multiplies to be a negative 36 has to be 1 plus 1 minus. But if they add together to be 0, it has to be the two things that are the same number, 1 plus 1 minus. So what's the square root of 36? It's 6, right? 6 times 6 equals 36. That's the pair of numbers that multiply to be 36, but are both the same. One positive, one negative would add to 0. So you start to see a pattern here. When that pattern develops and becomes like second nature and it starts to make sense, then this is something that you can do without actually writing it out, without actually adding that 0 in the middle or trying to decide what multiplies to be 36. That pattern is, you take the square root of the first thing. This is an x squared. So to get that in the first position, you would take x times x. That's the only way to get x squared. And then because this is minus 36, only two terms, and they're subtracted, so it'll be 1 plus 1 minus. I take the square root of 36, asking myself what number times itself equals 36. 6 times 6, 1 plus 1 minus. So mentally, I'm thinking square root of this and the square root of this. Remember, the square root just is asking what number times itself gives you that. So x squared minus 49. Right away, you might recognize this as two terms separated by subtraction, and they both have a perfect square, right? But you can take the square root of both of those. The square root of x squared is x. Has to be. And to get 49, negative 49, it'll be 7 times negative 7. That multiplies to a negative 49, but when I add those together, outside and inside, I get a plus 7 and a minus 7. And those two add to 0 so that there's no middle term. They cancel each other out. In this case, my FOIL process loses the O and the I because they add together to be 0. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's look at it a little bit more complicated. Okay. Again, first thing I notice, two terms. If it's two terms and there's no middle term, but they still want me to factor it, it's special, right? There's going to be a special trick to this one because somehow the middle term disappeared. So to make that happen, I'm going to have 1 plus 1 minus, and it's going to be the square root of both of these. So the square root of 100 is the easy one, right? Plus 10 minus 10. What about the square root of 4x squared? What's the square root of 4? 2. We can do it in pieces like that. The square root of 4x squared is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of x squared. If you want to just break it apart, if that's what your brain is telling you to do, you're absolutely right. What's the square root of 4? That's 2. What's the square root of x squared? That's x. So we just have to set it up so that the two parentheses are twins. They look exactly alike, except one's addition and one's subtraction. X to the fourth minus 36y squared. What's the square root of 25? 5, right? What's the square root of x to the fourth? What times itself would get me 4 in the exponent?
X squared.
5x squared, great job. So I've got 5x squared, they have to be the same. 5x squared times 5x squared does give me 25x to the fourth. And then the square root of 36 is 6. And y squared would have a square root of y. 6y times 6y would give me 36y squared. And I just make one addition and one subtraction. If I wanted to check myself here, this middle part is 30 x squared y, and this outside pairing would be negative 30 x squared y, and those are going to cancel each other out. One positive, one negative, they add to 0. The last thing that they'll do to you is something like 2x squared plus or minus 50. Well, can I take the square root of 50? Can I take the square root of 2? Right? There's no number that times itself equals 50. 7 times 7 equals 49. But there's no number that times itself equals 50. I don't want to start thinking about half of it, right? Common mistake, thinking 25 would be my choice. But no, I'm looking for something that times itself equals 50, and that doesn't work. But this is only two terms separated by subtraction, so I know it has to be this type. I'm going to say that one more time. Because it's only two terms, and it's separated by subtraction, I know if I can factor it, it has to be factored in this special way. So what do I want to do? Let's factor off a 2 and see what's left. Both of these could divide by 2. They have that common factor. So when I divide this by 2, I have just x squared. Dividing the 50 by 2, I have 25. And now the light bulb comes on, right? I just had to take off the disguise, put the 2 out front. 2 times x plus 5. X minus 5. So when I factor the 2 off, it doesn't go away. It stays in front of my 2 parentheses. When you have a common factor that you factor off, it's still part of your answer. Just comes along like decoration out in front of those parentheses. Just tags along there. The difference of 2 perfect squares will always factor in this way. Is all about problem solving or story problems. I think that we probably have enough work here without starting this, so I'm just going to leave 4-7, I think, for next week. If you want to pre-read it, it does help a little bit with story problems. We skipped 4-6. I don't know if you noticed that. We went from 4-5 to 4-7. We do skip 4-6. I'll probably talk about it briefly next week, but you don't have homework problems on it. It's a good section, though. We'll talk about it a little bit next week. The next slide on here, which will be slide number 26, is going to have the quiz. I'm going to put it in as a text box on slide 26. Can everybody open the PowerPoints okay? Anybody have trouble? You have trouble opening them up, Jeff? Yeah. Okay. So I won't put it here. I will... I'll create it as, can you open Word documents maybe, or what works for you the best? What if I just put
Whatever
it in
my wife can do.
Okay.
Honestly,
I'll put it as a Word document and put it on doc sharing. So
okay.
This week, 4.1 through 4.5. And a quiz, check doc sharing. It's only an 8-question quiz, and it just asks you to factor a few things. It's not multiple choice. It's one of our only ones that isn't multiple choice. And I will both put that on doc sharing, and I'll copy and paste it into a body of an email so that you're sure you can open it.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anybody
Thank
else who
you.
has trouble opening Word? Doesn't have Word or has trouble opening Word? Okay. Next week, we'll finish 4-7. That's kind of what I was thinking would work out for this. On that first slide, we were talking about maybe even 5 and 7 next week. We'll finish chapter 4 pretty quickly next week. We only have 3 homework problems from 4-7, and then we'll be ready to start chapter 5. It's important that we finish at least chapter 5 and chapter 6, so we're going to push to get through that. Our final exam happens on May 6th, so we are just over a month away from that. So, excellent job.